The Ready, Set, Grow podcast is sponsored by Ag Expert, software designed for Canadian agriculture. Visit them today at agexpert.ca.
Welcome to the Ready, Set, Grow podcast, where we like to showcase startup and early stage companies, as well as visit with innovators in the agriculture and food industry. My name is Michael, and today we're here with Joe Dales, co-founder at RH Accelerator, and Alain Goubau, CEO at Combyne Ag. Alain, thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Mike. Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me. So just as a bit of background about myself, I grew up on a mixed dairy and cash crop farm in eastern Ontario, just between Montreal and Ottawa. I'm a entrepreneur in the software space in agriculture, and so not involved daily on the farm, but I stay involved with some of the planning and management, helping my sister, my brother, and my parents think through some of the broader challenges as farmers. As broader upbringing, so my parents were really much of the school to kind of encourage us to fly the nest, go see kind of outside the farm and kind of decide what we wanted to do from there. So I actually have a chemical engineering degree. I think, the interest came from growing up on a farm. I always had an interest in things related to biology, chemistry, agronomy. So chemistry felt fairly natural, and then you like to do things and build things, so the engineering part came in that way. And in the process, I was also quite interested in how things are transformed and processed, and eventually that kind of led me full circle to where I am today, but I'll talk about that just a little bit shortly. And then the other thing is I actually studied law, but when I was in law school, I actually spent some time focusing on things like energy. I actually studied food and drug law in sort of environmental regulation and policy, which they've kind of come full circle because they're very present topics, I think, in the agricultural space right now. And before ending up in the software space, I spent some time at McKinsey and Company, sort of a large international consulting firm. And the internal joke, my initials being A&G, I literally worked only on agriculture-focused products, so labeled myself the Mr. Ag guy. It was a really fun experience, kind of got to see agriculture both on the input side and output side, fertilizer, animal nutrition, ag chem, sort of from the inside of the sort of big brand name companies that we know that operate in that space. And in the process, got interested in what digital might do to agriculture. And that's where, sort of through connections, paired up with a company called FarmLead at the time that was building a digital marketplace for grain. Spent some time there, learned a bunch of things, lessons learned along the way, and eventually, as out of that came the idea for Combyne, which was roughly incubated about a year ago and really came out as a product November last year. So that's kind of the broad stroke background of who I am and how I got to where I am today.
Very exciting. For the people that haven't heard of Combyne, can you tell us a little bit about it, who it's targeted at, what you're trying to accomplish, and just share the story of Combyne and where you want to take it? Yeah.
So the way we define Combyne is we call it a crop marketing hub purposely built for farmers. And the way we came to building it is really a mix of things that we learned working on FarmLead, also spending a lot of time talking to farmers, Western Canada, Ontario. We have this notion internally, we like to say, have a little mouth and big ears. So really bring a paper prototype, a concept, show it, see how people react, and try to unpack and identify the patterns. And then the last thing is it comes also from my own experience on our farm, where when I think about how we do our crop marketing process, so grains, oilseeds, pulses, we really have a bunch of stakeholders involved. My brother manages mostly the pure marketing. My father likes to stay aware of how much we've contracted. forward contracting, get a sense of sort of our risk exposure in terms of what we have to deliver and whether we're making sales incrementally. My sister wants to know we have enough buffer to feed our dairy herd, and then my mother is, doing bookkeeping and wants to understand, well, when cash flow is going to be coming in. And so it's kind of observing patterns that we were seeing there that led us to this notion of let's build a crop marketing hub and really a record keeping hub around crop marketing, purposefully built for farmers. And so what that leads to is, there's kind of two core areas we focus on, which is helping stay on top of what you have. So either what you're storing on farm or what you're growing in terms of a new crop or expect to grow. So we kind of call that inventory. And then the other aspect is what you've committed. So as you're kind of going through a crop marketing year, you're forward contracting when you haven't even planted or grown the crop. You might be doing some spot contracts. You might be storing over a certain period and then selling bit by bit. So kind of how do you stay on top of what volume you've committed to whom? And then understanding, from there, how that is informing the average prices you realized, especially if as a producer, you might be marketing a couple commodities across a couple different buyers. So how do you kind of tie all that information together to get a real sense of, well, where do I stand? That's really what we say, or what we mean by a farmer-centric crop marketing hub. We're not so much in sort of providing advisory services. We're really more the underlying tool that helps people stay on top of where they're at, because our big belief is things start with good record keeping. If you have a good sense of where you're at, you're going to be making much more confident and informed decisions, whether it's in collaboration with an advisor on your own, but getting sort of your basic records down is our foundation. Maybe what I'll add is there was kind of looking at the patterns. There's kind of three big principles or themes that we try to focus on as we build the software. The first one is mobile first. This was something we went in from the get-go because we really felt that people were saying, I want to be doing these things on the go. I've got a version of maybe Excel sheets or a whiteboard, but when I kind of get an interesting opportunity, an interesting bid is seen or offered to me, I'm kind of trying to go back and trying to remember, well, what happens if I sell this volume? Do I have this volume? Am I comfortable with that? And so it's a decision you're often making on the go. So that was kind of first principle, is mobile first in our approach. The second thing, as I mentioned, is farmer centric. So we feel there's and neutral in our approach. So we think there's a decent amount of tools that serve a lot of what grain buyers are doing, but we purposely went out to build something that was built for farmers when it comes to the crop marketing process, because they have slightly different needs and workflows and document management that a grain buyer has. But we also work agnostically, across different buyers. It's really meant for farmers that are working with 2-3 buyers at a time, potentially more. So farmer-centric and neutral is kind of second core principle. And then third core principle is minimize typing and maximize integrations. And that's just, people tell us I don't want to type. And we're like, fair. Challenge accepted. That's a really tough one. So we've been working hard at solving that and kind of take a 3-prong approach. One is obviously just try to make things as simple as possible. The second thing, though, is we've embedded into the app capability to read, parse, and digitize things like PDFs, screenshots, pictures of paper copies of contracts, and eventually we're going to work our way to load tickets and settlements as well. But that's just this sort of step point, really where we want to go. And we think the industry is now ready, as there's a gradual acceptance of all of these things are going to be more and more digital and interconnected. And so we have this thing that we call Combyne Connect that kind of sits behind the app. It's not necessarily seen by you as a user. What it does is individual farmers can link into other tools they might be using, whether it's a bid monitoring system, a farm management software, a grain cart load ticket report, to get a sense of how much their combine is dumped load by load and how much inventory they have. Or the other thing we want to eventually do is link that straight into the individual grain accounts that farmers can have with different grain buyers. And there's a bunch of companies that are helping kind of make that information able to flow out of these software systems. Our view in all this is it's a farmer's information. So the inventory is strictly private to the farmer on the app. Same idea with contracts and eventually load tickets, settlements. But that information, it's kind of already flowing out of buyer systems. It's just in a bit of a not easy to work with format, with PDF and email, things like that. So our goal is to really kind of tie all that information together. And that's why we called it Combyne. So there's a bit of a play on words. If you know a bit the history of the farm machine at Combyne, the Combyne is a machine that was built to kind of do and bring together a bunch of different things. So threshing, cutting, cleaning. A bit the same idea here is we want to combine all the key information that one would need to kind of understand where they are from a marketing position, inventory, contracts, things like that, and then make informed decisions. So that's really the broader overarching goal of Combyne. It's crop marketing hub built for farmers to help them make more informed decisions. And we think through that process, you can ultimately optimize the value of every bushel that you market.
So I know it can be difficult to get farmers and agribusiness to use, say, new innovative pieces of software. Can you take us a little bit through the process of getting farmers and agribusinesses on it and how they use it?
Yeah, so I would say one of the first things is we picked a core persona. I think that was one of the big lessons learned is for a while when you try to cater to multiple audiences or user types. So a farmer has very different kind of workflows and jobs they're trying to get done compared to a grain buyer. And if you're trying to build for both at the same time, it can be quite challenging. So I'd say that's probably one of the first things is pick a core persona. The second thing is we really try to put a lot of emphasis on good user-centric design. And I think that that's something that had been underserved in the ag space and something we frankly also kind of didn't fully appreciate. I didn't really understand what good UX or UI kind of as the lingo stands in the industry, and it's really hard to do. It's the type of thing that you don't realize you're looking at something that's really nicely put together in design. And when we talk about software to design or UX, we talk about how the screen looks, the color contrast, the buttons you're tapping, all these things, plus it's reliable. So those are things that I would say is worth an investment. And I think it's becoming a lot more common theme in ag. And what it means, though, is you need to find people that are able to combine kind of the ability to understand agriculture, but also have really good design and software skills. And I would say that's probably one of the hardest things we run into is trying to find that right balance in our team between people who don't really come from farming, but have these pretty incredible skills when it comes to designing software and things like that. And people who understand farming. I'm one of them on the team. Obviously, we're trying to hire more what we kind of call farm kids who want to get into software and design. And then we just try to invest a ton of time in educating the non-farming folks on our team. So that's kind of what we do internally. And I would say externally is really try to approach slow but steady with humility. We try not to make claims about things that we can't actually do today. We're kind of typically take an approach of under promise and over deliver. Take our time, be patient, and try to spend as much time as we can, kind of what we call belly to belly or face to face, to kind of drive more champion users and build that way. And then in our particular context, we want to work with sort of either existing software solutions that are complementary to what we build. So a big part of how do we drive adoption is Combyne Connect. And when we present the concept, and we really started talking more about it, and over the late summer this fall, a lot of farmers are quite enthusiastic about what we're trying to do, and they're starting to tell us, oh, you should connect with this tool, or you can put in my name when you go talk to them to say, I think they should connect into Combyne. So we're hoping that is going to be a good pathway for us to kind of drive more awareness and adoption. And we've got 2 or 3 partners on the bin monitoring, farm management, and grain cart that we're working, can't quite disclose yet, but hoping to launch over the next couple of months. But then the other group that we want to work with is independent advisors. So whether it's crop marketing advisors, lenders, folks that help manage price risk in commodities, those are complementary channels for us. And we found out over time that a lot of the information that we want to put together in Combyne is the same information that they need to kind of do a good job of providing high quality advice to farmers. And so we see them as a natural partner also. So kind of say, if I were to recap, it'd be focus a lot on user-centric design and do the hard work that it takes. The second thing is use sort of, I think now, a growing groundswell of technology integrations. And then the third thing is think about, natural partners or allies who can build on your core value prop and augment their own business by working with that. So that's generally the approach we've been using.
So just for me, I'm a farmer. How would I get started? I guess go to the App Store and download it like I just did. So it was very simple. Now I'll fill in my information and go from there. Is there a cost to this, or how do you guys get paid?
Yeah, and I think that's obviously a very valid question. So the way we think about being paid is we launched the product in November 2021, right? So right now we're putting a lot of value of getting just people to play with it and give us that feedback. Sort of those early champion users, we really care about. Use it and tell us what you think. But if you look at our website, we have a pricing page up, and we're going to start launching paid plans. And the way we're thinking about it is, if you're managing a small amount of records and sort of whether it's contracts and whatnot and bushels, there's a small cost to us to manage that storage cost. But as you use it more and you get more value out of it, we want to charge a small fee for it. And you'll see we're probably going to end up in somewhere in the range of $10 to $20 a month, depending on how much you use it. And the way we think about it is we don't think free is free. There's sort of this saying that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. But we have no interest in a business model based on sharing data or things like that. We want to say, hey, if it's valuable and it helps with decision making, productivity, your workflows, pay us a value for it. And really, we have this concept of fair use, which is the more information and records that you put into Combyne, the more insights and understanding about how you're doing, your average prices, your cash flows, where all these things are coming, the more value you get out of it. So that's really how we think about pricing. Now, that being said, that's kind of today. As we build out over time, we see more advanced features, things like getting a sense of insights on volumes and prices, kind of think a bit of like some sort of farmer data cooperative. It's a concept. It's an idea that a lot of folks we're talking to about that we're still figuring out, but that I think a lot of people are curious and intrigued about it. Some of the advisors that we're working with, if we can kind of empower their business to do better, we're probably going to look at a price plan for them. And then eventually we see things around crop marketing advisors, lenders, because at the end of the day, crop marketing is cash flow. How you manage risk on that cash flow can open up some interesting conversations about working capital lending. So that's kind of the much future out vision. But yeah, today, simple use is free. If you start getting good value out of it, fairly straightforward, kind of $10 to $20 a month, proportional to kind of how much you're using it and how much value you're getting out of the app.
Oh, yeah, that's really awesome. At RH Accelerator, we get to work with a lot of startups and entrepreneurs. I was just wondering if you could take us through just going into being an entrepreneur in the ag industry and any advice you'd have.
Yeah, quite a few, a lot of scar tissue and lessons learned, but I'll kind of maybe share a couple of core principles or things that I tend to value a lot. I think for me, one of the first things is I like to say humility is for me one of the strongest forms of leadership, and it just serves you, yes, in the farming community. I think there's a saying in the farming world, you can smell bullshit from a mile away. But I would also say, just more broadly, it helps with curiosity, having an open mind, and then learning, right? So a lot of what we do is there's a lot of things we don't know as we talk to different users, to advisors. So that humility, I think, comes into play. And that for me is something that I think is a core part. I'd say just in general, building something is hard no matter what. Like, yes, you hear about the glory stories, but it's hard. So kind of on a personal level, manage that energy, those different trade-offs that you're going through. And certainly if you've got a family, like I have a wife and 3 kids, it's an important part of the equation in terms of what you're doing. And then I'd say sort of the other big principle for me is team. I really believe, if you've ever watched kind of the Netflix special on the Chicago Bulls glory days, and the story is a lot about Michael Jordan, but I pay a lot more attention to the coach, Phil Jackson, on his notion that the strength of the team is each individual member, but the strength of each member is the team. That's really a core part. I think as an entrepreneur, whether in ag or other places, really think about who you have around you and the principles and approach by which you work together. And we try to really infuse that in terms of how we hire, how we work internally, but also with partners, with users, with advisors. And it's probably an area that I would say, there's kind of the cliche, hire slow, fire fast. We had to kind of make a couple of mistakes to kind of set our DNA about how we build our team and who we bring on and how we work as a group. I'd say trust is the other piece, because as a team, if you're going to have difficult conversations, if you're going to be able to have the conversation about the things that are important, what's working, what's not working, what we can improve on the software, on, the uptake, on even internal behaviors, processes, starts with trust. You have to be able to talk to each other. And I think that principle applies in farming just as much. I look at it, how we interact on our own farm, kind of being able to talk openly about, what needs to get done, what's working, not working, for me is a universal principle. So I take a lot of those things and bring them into, how we approach entrepreneurship and building a company. But yeah, it's hard, but if you've got those core values, it makes the journey a lot more easier and manageable and honest with yourself and with your team as you go along.
We know you're going to be successful. We've been watching you for a while, and we're very impressed with, your drive and approach to this. And we would encourage any farmers or agribusiness that are in the grain industry to check out Combyne, the app, the website, give it a test drive, and let the team there know, how they can improve it and how it can benefit you. And you take 30 seconds and, what's the greatest benefit? What's in it for me if I'm a farmer or I'm a grain elevator? Just something simple that you can hit me over the head that encourages me to go download it tomorrow.
Yeah, and I would focus first and foremost as a farmer. It's a farmer-centric solution. But it's basically, if you want to know at any given moment how much you have, how much you've sold, your average price, how much you should be thinking about booking your next sale price, and having that on the go without having to type, that's really what we're going to help you do. That's this idea of a crop marketing hub to make more informed decisions to help you optimize the value of every bushel. Also add, if folks are interested in learning more, by all means reach out, help at Combyne.ag. Again, Combyne with a Y. That's if you're just curious or have questions. Personally, I'm very reachable on LinkedIn. So if you're thinking of ways to collaborate, whether it's through a software integration or for your broader as an advisor in the ag industry of some form, certainly reach out. And like I said, the app stores and www.combyne.ag.
Yeah, thank you, Alain, for sharing how people can connect with you. Before we head out, is there anything else that you want our listeners to know about?
One of the things that I think in ag, there's a lot of conversation about is this whole topic on data, right? I think it's sometimes a little bit inflated. There's a lot of concern, but I think, as an industry, I think it's important that we start talking not so much about the concerns or problems, but more about what we can do with information, and to kind of open up a bit more to the idea that, permission controlled sharing of information about how a crop was produced, how certain metrics, things like that, are performing on a farm operation can actually create a lot of value. And I think, it kind of encouraged more broadly the industry to talk about, and especially farmers, how can things create value around sharing information, as opposed to kind of having sort of an immediate default of, well, I don't want to share information that doesn't create any value. I'm not advocating in any way open sharing and all these things, but I do think there's a lot of things to learn about how other industries leverage sort of more standardized data structure, more seamless flowing of data structure, just to be more efficient as individuals making decisions, but also to kind of compare and contrast and benchmark information. And then I think more broadly, if you look at the macro trends in sort of farms and consumers at the other end, there is digital infrastructure being built up to link these things up, and kind of taking an approach of curiosity and thinking about the models and the possibility, I think, without necessarily committing, I think is a more open-minded approach, going back a bit to sort of this humility principle and being curious, as opposed to making assumptions that, it's by definition something to be concerned or worried about. I think that's something that needs to evolve. And this comes from a conversation even on our own farm about thinking about, what being in the cloud, being connected can do, and how it creates more efficiency. I still remember moving our bookkeeping from sort of desktop to cloud, and there was a lot of concerns, working with my mom on doing this, but then realizing, wait, by sharing information to my brother, my sister, my father, a bookkeeper, we got more efficient and we got a much better sense of where we were at. To me, that's an example of just allowing ourselves to be more open-minded about what are the possibilities out there as kind of this whole idea of ag cloud starts becoming constant and prevalent in the ag industry as a conversation point.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thank our listeners for tuning in to the Ready, Set, Grow podcast, and thank you, Alain, for joining us.